it fell shut. Trapping the chickens inside, the dog slithered to the ground backward. He looked up where the egg had been, where it still must be behind the little slide door. And suddenly he ran into the horse barn and up the stairs to the high loft hen house. At the top of the stairs, the big dog reared up and put his weight against the door. The latch released so suddenly that the dog fell forward into the hen house. The surprised flock panicked, huddled against the walls and the ceiling. In a racket, the dog did not see the door swaying shut behind him, did not hear the slight click of the latch. At last, the chickens recognized the dog and came out of panic, but they still stood and craned, weary necks in a packed group in a far corner. The dog started towards the shellless egg at the little slide door. He looked away, looked at the rising tier of nest as he stepped on the egg and squashed it. With a rush, the weary huddle of chickens pelted out of the corner. The dog let the struggle for the egg membrane. He smelled other eggs. He hurried to the tier of nests. He poked his nose into the nest in the lowest tier. A broken shellless egg lay amongst a few with white shells. He licked up what was left of the broken egg, carefully licked off the yolk mist shells on the other eggs. He went to the next nest. 3 chickens in a higher tier, broken from their nest. Interested, the dog reared up, placed his paws on the patch before the high nest, and saw an unbroken shellless egg. But he could not step on the egg in a high nest. It posed a problem. He considered it. His tail waved vaguely, thoughtfully. It was a problem. On the big farm, the hard, sudden rain had driven the farmer and Joe, the hired man, into the barn. The two squatted on their haunches just inside the doorway and watched the relentless fall of rain. Looks like nothing but rain the rest of the day, Joe said. If you ask me, it's a good day for sleeping in the hay, and you look as if you could stand an afternoon in the hay. Oh, I don't need sleep, Joe said casually. Anyway, I wouldn't sleep. All I've got on my mind is the remodeling of that barn. He stared into the rain. Suddenly, he gave his knee a hard slap. What was that for? The farmer demanded. Well, I'm puzzled. Monday and Tuesday, I still had a full lay. 65 and 78. And that's right for this time of the year. It's spring. Every hen should be laying. But since Wednesday, the flock had been going down steadily, and last night I collected only 13 eggs. That's strange. But how? That remodeling coming? How's that remodeling coming? The boss said. Joe shrugged. About the speed it would go when you don't have time, don't have money, and just have old horse stable lumber to work with. I even smell like a horse from just working with that lumber. The farmer groaned. Just 13 eggs from the whole flock. Joe said morosely. And I'd figured on using that egg money for some new lumber. I can't make it from the old horse stables. Besides, I need wiring and electrical equipment. Wire the barns for the light, he joked. Then I could work all night long. He looked almost wistfully up at the high haymow. Sleep, he said shortly. I've got problems. as if worrying about money and lumber and worry isn't enough. Something's going on there at my place. The rooster's driven to his death. The little red hen disappears, and now no eggs. The boss looked interested. You mean you kept that tallest runt that you were suffering over the while back, and that I told you to kill and eat? Joe, farming is business. Fussing with tallest chickens is not business. I know you hope to build that place into a poultry farm, but you'll never do it by petting around with a 2-cent hen. No, I guess not, Joe muttered. Suddenly he fled, looked straight at the farmer. Could you have killed and eaten that mare, supposing you liked horse meat? If something had happened to her that night, the colt was coming. The farmer winced. You are talking about $3,000 mare, not a chicken. A $5,000 mare or a 2-cent chicken, Joe said hostily. What's the difference? And if I didn't fuss and pet and try to understand a 2-cent hen, what do you think I'd be with that night with the mare and colt when you were chewing your fingernails down their knuckles? The farmer got a queer look on his face. Joe, he said evenly. I see you know that I've sold that mare and colt for cool $5,000 and not for $3,000. But don't think I'm not grateful. Oh, I know. I've been letting it slide. I know I'm tight. But I'd honestly planned to reward you for saving that mare. He glanced up at the haymow, struggled in his mind with himself. All right, I'll go up in the hay and do your sleeping for you. But you get yourself to town, order what you need to wire that barn for the light, and have them send the bills to me. A startled Joe rose to his feet. Speechless, the farmer held up his hand as if to silence speechless Joe. Gwan ran to the old car and get going, he said roughly. I'd get up in that haymow and start examining my head. Must be something wrong with it when I help the best hired man I've ever had to start a poultry farm on his own. He climbed heavily, but when he looked down, Joe was still there, staring up at him. Hey, get going, the farmer said. You make me uncomfortable. I'm not much for good deeds, and I'd better quick slip it off. Be back for the milking, Joe wasn't listening. He started for the car, turned and came running back. The first thing is to wire the basement and the barnyard for light. Then I can work for hours after dark, he shouted up to the farmer. He pounded away through the rain without waiting for an answer. The car stopped in the driveway beside the house. The man hurried through the rain to the kitchen door, but stopped. Better chase the chickens in out of wet and mud, he muttered, and turned and ran to the barnyard. There wasn't a chicken in the barnyard. At the top of the ramp, the slide door was shut. The man threw a startled glance at it. Somebody closed the little door and locked up the hens. He charged up the stairs. The flock heard him pounding up the stairway and came crowding to the door. Beyond the packed flock, in the middle of the hen house, stood a dog. The man stared at the dog. Then the dog's carriage oozed away. He lay down flat before the man, meek, guilty, helpless. about the happiest day of my life, the man said slowly. And there you are. And you've been here all the time. That's where the eggs and the little hen went, killed the rooster and ate the little hen. And now it's eggs. His arms hung heavily and straight beside him. He plowed through the flock, came at the dog, hands hanging. With my bare hands, he muttered, egg yolk still on your nose. Killed the little hen with my own hands, he softly repeated at his gaze. But his eyes shifted to the tier of nest. The yolk of the egg dripped from a hind nest. It momentarily distracted the man. Suddenly, he turned to the nest, peered into it, looked at the front edges of the other nest, stained with egg yolk. Rolled them out, didn't you? Broke them against the edges of the nest. But why? You took them out on high nest when there's all kinds of eggs in the lower nest in easy reach. He pulled a white egg out of a nest, examined it. You spilled yolk all over the shells of this egg, and then you licked it clean. But you didn't take it and eat it. Why? Suddenly, he looked from the egg to his hand. He grimaced. With my bare hands, I was going to choke you with my hands, and I could have right then. But it was all lost in talk again. He shoved the eggs into the nest. I've got to get cleaned up to get time before I waste everything in talk. Come along. The straw on the floor pushed up before the dog as he crawled his humble, obedient way after the man. At the top of the stairs, the man held the door open. He had to pass the man, but the man, in his haste, squeezed the floor shut on the dog's tail. The dog yelped a small, miserable yelp at the hastily swallowed. Behind the man, he oozed silently down the stairs. But instead of hurrying to the house to clean up, the man darted across the yard to the basement of the barn, stood in the doorway in a sudden, excited estimating of all he was going to need to bring electricity to the barn. His mind busy, he quite forgot the dog was laying in meek flatness behind him and stepped over the dog as he backed away from the barn. The man walked backward on the way from the barn to the house. Eyeing and estimating the distance, the dog crept along before the backing man. His mind still on his figures. The man threw open the kitchen door, but then stood preoccupied again. He mumbled and calculated. The confused dog lay before the sill of the open door, not knowing what was expected of him. Then, when the man continued standing and the mumbling, he miserably crawled past the man's feet into the house and crept under the kitchen table. In a few moments, the man came hurrying into the kitchen, began tugging at his clothes. He rubbed a nervous hand over his chin. Got to shave? Let's see now. How many insulators should I take? 1,000 feet of wiring should do it. Just so I've got good light in the basement and a big spotlight for the barnyard. Switches, golly, what a mindful of things. He began shaving, began humming as he shaved. You know, he said into the mirror as he scraped with a long, straight razor. Meek and boneless and brainless, you must be a smart whip. Sneaking in here while I figured my mind was busy with other things, thinking maybe in that way you could get yourself a home." His razor stopped dead on his cheek. He whipped around, lunged down, and peered under the table. "Now, how'd you get here so quick?" My head's buzzing with figures, but with some part of my mind, I must have known you were under the table. I was thinking to you. I was talking to you. Yeah, you are smart as whip. And smart as you'd be, something to talk to. In a way, I suppose, almost as good as the little red hen. The dog lay flat, stretched between his paws, eyes staring straight ahead over the floor. But at the new tone in the man's voice, his tail suddenly gave the table leg a hard slap. Then he lay still again. The man lunged beside him, looked him over curiously. For a moment, he touched the drying soap on his face. Then he thoughtfully fingered the sharp razor. "You know," he said slowly, "I could have killed you that first moment in the hen house, but I talked again. I talked myself out of it. But I hanged if I talked to myself into keeping you. I could forgive your stealing eggs and killing the rooster, but there's one thing remains. If you came back, if you were here all these days, then you killed my little hen, and that's something I can't forgive and won't talk myself out of it. I can't kill you now anymore, but I can lose you right in the middle of the busy business section of the town." He got up. "Come along. I'm going to lose you in the town, but right now, I'm going to lock you in the car while I get ready. Otherwise, I might talk myself into keeping you just by talking to you. Come along." Face covered with dried leather, bare shoulders quivering to the cold rain, the man walked to the car and yanked the door open. The door in silent hopelessness flowed up to their seat. The man slammed the door shut.